The courtroom was already tense when the CEO started smirking, but the moment that froze the room was when he looked across at the janitor in his worn gray uniform and said, with a polished little laugh, "Your Honor, with all due respect, this man should be grateful I even remember his name." A gasp rippled through the gallery. The old janitor flinched, not because the insult was new, but because it had clearly been happening to him for years. Then Judge Caprio looked up, really looked at the man for the first time, and something in his face changed so subtly that most people would have missed it. But the bailiff saw it, the attorneys saw it, and every instinct in that room whispered the same thing at once. This was about to become a disaster for the wrong person. If you've ever wanted to watch arrogance walk itself straight into judgment, stay with this one, because before the hearing was over, a man who thought a tailored suit could bury the truth was going to learn what happens when dignity has a witness and power meets a judge who remembers. And when you hear the line Judge Caprio delivered near the end, you'll want to tell me in the comments exactly where you felt the whole case turn. The janitor's name was Rafael Ortiz, 68 years old. Stooped a little from years of lifting trash barrels, hauling chemical buckets, and mopping floors long after younger men had gone home. He stood at the plaintiff's table in a faded maintenance uniform with one cuff frayed and one collar corner bent from too many wash cycles. His hands were thick and scarred, the nails permanently stained with honest work. But he held himself with a quiet dignity that made the room feel smaller around him. His hair was silver and close-cropped. His shoes were clean, if cracked. He did not look angry. He looked tired in the deep, dangerous way people look when they have spent too long swallowing humiliation because they needed the paycheck. Across from him sat Adrian Vale, CEO of Vale Meridian Holdings, a man who seemed assembled out of expensive surfaces. Navy suit, silk tie, watch face flashing under the fluorescent lights, hair cut so sharply it looked measured. He was the kind of executive who smiled with only his teeth, the kind of man who had spent years confusing intimidation with leadership and results with virtue. Even his posture radiated ownership. He leaned back like the courtroom was a boardroom he'd eventually buy. On paper, the case seemed simple enough. Rafael had sued for wrongful termination, defamation, and emotional distress after Vale publicly accused him of stealing a diamond bracelet from the executive floor during a charity gala. Security removed Rafael in front of guests. His cart had been searched. His locker had been opened. His name had been circulated in an internal memo as a suspected thief. He lost his job the next morning. Then, 2 days later, the bracelet was found in the CEO's daughter's own vehicle, tangled in a designer shawl. No apology, no reinstatement, no correction sent to staff. Just silence, as if the janitor's humiliation was too insignificant to repair. Vale's attorney tried to frame it as an unfortunate misunderstanding. Rafael, he said, had been near the executive lounge. The item had gone missing. Security had acted on limited information. The bracelet was later recovered. Regrettable, yes, but hardly malicious. That was when Adrian Vale decided to speak for himself, and it was the first mistake that changed the energy of the room. "Misunderstanding," he said, lifting one eyebrow as if even that word was too generous. "Your Honor, I run a company, not a daycare. If people who push brooms wander into places they don't belong, consequences happen." The courtroom went silent, not quiet. Silent. The kind of dead silence that follows the unmistakable sound of a person revealing exactly who they are. Rafael lowered his eyes for half a second. His attorney put a hand on his arm. Judge Caprio said nothing at first. He only folded his hands and studied the CEO with that famously calm expression of his, the one that had unnerved liars for decades. Then he turned to Rafael and asked very softly, "Mr. Ortiz, how long did you work in that building?" 26 years, Judge," Rafael said. His voice trembled once, then steadied. "I cleaned that place before Mr. Vale had his corner office, before the marble lobby, before the private elevators. He swallowed. I knew which lights flickered in winter and which pipes moaned in August. A murmur drifted through the gallery. Raphael testified that he had been called to clean a spill near the executive floor after the gala. He entered with permission, mopped up broken glass, and was leaving when security surrounded him. One guard emptied his pockets, another tipped over his cleaning cart. Guests stared, someone filmed. Adrian Vale had come out of the ballroom, glanced at Raphael, and said, loud enough for the room to hear, "I knew it. They always look humble right before they steal." A woman in the second row covered her mouth. Raphael's attorney then played the security footage. There was Raphael, exactly as he described, pushing a mop bucket through the hallway. There was the spill. There were the guards converging before he even reached the elevator. No bracelet in his pockets, no suspicious movement, no attempt to flee. Just an old man in uniform being treated like contamination in a luxury corridor. Vale's lawyer objected, insisting the company was acting in real time under pressure. But then came the second twist. Internal text messages between the security chief and executive staff, obtained in discovery after weeks of resistance. One message from a senior aide read, "Don't let him get back downstairs before Mr. Vale sees him." Another, sent minutes later, "Better if we make an example out of this one. Staff's been getting too comfortable upstairs." That's when everything changed. Even Adrian Vale sat forward. Raphael's attorney moved deeper. There were prior complaints from service staff, written statements, housekeepers, porters, maintenance workers, all describing public insults, bag checks, denied elevator access, accusations without evidence, a hidden pattern, an entire culture of humiliation wrapped in corporate polish. Raphael was not an isolated mistake. He was the oldest target in a long line of convenient ones. Judge Caprio's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. Then came the witness nobody expected to matter as much as she did, Eleanor Marsh, a former executive assistant. She arrived in a plain black dress, shoulders tense, carrying a folder thick with printed emails. She testified that Adrian Vale often used humiliation as theater, especially in front of donors and board members. He liked visible discipline. He liked fear. 2 days before the gala, when discussing missing inventory and rising insurance premiums, he allegedly said, "If something disappears, start with the janitors. It's always easier to replace a mop than a reputation." A sharp gasp broke across the room. Vale snapped, "She's a disgruntled former employee." Elena didn't even look at him. "I resigned after he told me to remove Mr. Ortiz from the anniversary photo wall because, quote, no investor wants to see the help aging in the background." The courtroom went dead silent. And that was when Judge Caprio asked the question that stunned everyone. He leaned slightly toward Raphael and said, "Mr. Ortiz, did you once work nights at St. Agnes School?" Raphael blinked, confused. "Yes, Judge, long time ago. Cleaning hallways, fixing desks sometimes." Caprio removed his glasses slowly. "Did you ever find a frightened boy hiding in the boiler room before scholarship interviews and tell him not to be ashamed of worn-out shoes?" Raphael's face changed. First confusion, then recognition, then disbelief so pure it seemed to lift the years off him. "Tommy," he whispered. A sound swept through the courtroom. Judge Caprio smiled sadly, almost to himself. "Nobody has called me that in this room in a very long time." The gallery erupted in whispers. Adrian Vale's confidence finally cracked. Caprio let the shock settle, then spoke with measured calm. As a boy, he explained, he had attended St. Agnes on scholarship. His mother could not afford proper dress shoes before an interview that would shape his future. He had hidden in embarrassment. And it was Raphael Ortiz, then a young custodian, who had found him, cleaned the dust off his shoes with a rag, straightened his collar, and told him, "Character walks in before shoes do." He had never forgotten it. Vale's attorney tried to object to relevance. but Caprio cut him off with a glance that could have split granite. Counselor, the relevance is moral before it is legal, and before I am finished, it will be both. Adrian Vale tried one last act of contempt. He laughed, though now it sounded strained. So that's what this is? Nostalgia? Sentiment? We're all supposed to cry because the janitor was nice to a kid once? The courtroom went silent again, deeper than before, because every person there knew he had just said the worst possible thing. Judge Caprio leaned forward, and when he spoke, his voice was calm enough to be unforgettable. No, Mr. Vale. We are here because a man with power mistook service for inferiority, poverty for suspicion, and dignity for something that could be revoked by security. He paused. You humiliated a decent man not because evidence demanded it, but because your ego enjoyed it. Vale's face tightened. He started to speak, but Caprio raised one finger. Let me save you from your own instincts. Wealth is not wisdom. Authority is not character. And if the only way a man can feel tall is by forcing honest people to kneel, then he is not powerful. He is merely small in a more expensive suit. It landed like a hammer. Then came the monologue that crushed what was left of Vale's defense. Caprio spoke of invisible labor, of the people who clean towers they will never own, of the quiet cruelty of making the poor prove innocence faster than the rich prove accusation. He spoke of 26 years of loyal service, wiped out in one public spectacle, because humiliation was easier than accountability. He spoke of Raphael's record, spotless, Vale's internal messages damning, the company culture corrosive. And finally, he looked directly at the CEO and said, You did not just fire a janitor, Mr. Vale. You tried to erase a human being and call it management. By then, Adrian Vale had gone from smug to defensive to pale and rigid, his jaw locked, his hands no longer still. The ruling was devastating. Judge Caprio found for Rafael Ortiz in full, awarding substantial damages for defamation, wrongful termination, and emotional distress. He ordered the company to issue a formal written correction to all staff, restore Rafael's full pension benefits, and refer its executive security practices for civil investigation. He further directed that the internal communications suggesting discriminatory targeting be transmitted to the appropriate labor authorities. Then, in a final sentence that sent a visible tremor through the defense table, he said, Mr. Vale, the most expensive lie in this courtroom was your belief that dignity belongs only to the people on the top floor. Raphael covered his face and wept. Not loudly, not dramatically, just the quiet collapse of a man who had carried shame that was never his to bear. In the row behind him, former co-workers began crying too. Even Elena Marsh wiped her eyes. Months later, Vale Meridian Holdings faced multiple labor complaints. 2 executives resigned. The company settled with several service workers whose grievances had long been buried. Raphael never returned to janitorial work, but he did return to the building once, invited by staff who lined the lobby and applauded when he walked through it in a new suit paid for by his grandchildren. And somewhere in that crowd, people said there was a framed quote from Judge Caprio hanging near the service elevator so nobody would forget what had finally been said out loud. If this story moved you, if you believe the people who do the hardest, quietest work deserve more than contempt from the powerful, tell me in the comments which line hit you hardest. And if you want more stories where arrogance collapses, truth rises, and justice remembers the people the world tries to overlook, like, subscribe, and share this with someone who still believes a courtroom can restore more than a verdict.